we follow from a different place. Good morning. Today is Friday, May 10th, and it's a little before noon. This is a reconvening of Senate Natural Resources, Senate Economic Development, and in fact, Senate findings. All those under through our radar. We did some final housekeeping on 687's provisions that were everything drafted by Mr. Kowski and Mr. Gray, and we settled on those changes. They are in the draft document, draft 3.1, 5/10/24 timestamp 11/29 AM, and it's offered by Senator Ron Hinsdale and others. And council, if you could just walk us through the changes and start on the last options.
Sure, Ellen Jakowski, Office of Legislative Counsel. So I made two changes. So on page 1, the 4th and then the 5th instances of amendment have highlighting, those are the only things I have changed. So the 4th instance of amendment is amending the language in tier 1A. So the requirements that a municipality must demonstrate include the following: subsection H, public water and wastewater systems or planned improvements have the capacity to support additional development within the tier 1A area. And then the 5th instance of amendment is on page 2, and it goes with this. And so it's adding language to the tier 1A area guidelines that the board is supposed to draft. And so on the top of page 2, what is section 29?
And I join you guys. Sorry.
We're reading through them. Page 2.
On or before January 1, 2026, the Land Use Review Board shall publish guidelines to direct municipalities seeking to obtain the tier 1A area status. That's existing. The guidelines shall include how a municipality shall demonstrate that improvements are planned for a public water or wastewater system, and at what stage in the planning process the improvements need to be.
What's that mean? Well, this is right guidance for council.
The board is going to write guidance on how a municipality demonstrates that improvements are planned and at what stage in the process they need to be. You are giving the board discretion on what the guidelines will say. You are actually not giving them a lot of direction, just saying how the municipality will demonstrate that they have planned up improvements and at what stage they need to be.
It also is coupled with an edit you already have it marked on the prior page. So we did this with adult vendors. There's language on line 17 of page 1, and then a little bit more about what do we mean by that, and it's spelled out. It will be developed in the guidance.
Well, my response to the suspenders is they're wonderful, but you need pants.
Okay, so noted for the record.
It's hard to hold them up without.
No, so seriously, any. How does this language sound?
Or trousers, as they would say.
Trousers, yeah. Right. Any Senator Watson?
Just thinking about the language that we had discussed, were you thinking that was not precise enough? Or clear enough?
You did not give me precise language to use.
Oh,
So if you think that this captures what it is you think you were directing me to do, please let me know.
I thought it's good.
Yeah.
This plan is.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that, anyway.
I would love it to be a little stronger. I don't know if we have time to
Right now, it's not.
Well, there's gonna be a little, I mean, this is, I'm trying to help us by really setting a threshold quite high, like sort of showstopperish more than finesse, but if you want to work on that, there may be a change, because we're gonna be looking at a finance amendment, and eventually they're gonna combine, so there'll be one more opportunity to put something in. The only challenge is whatever request you change then has to get reviewed by the whole group, so just moving on a lot.
Do you feel like this is a high in the bar?
To me, it suffices. You know, when you say, well, how developed, how far, you know, how are we defining what is well enough developed, you know?
Or what?
It's, you can go and see it, it's there.
Yeah, but big projects.
Yeah,
take
you
a
have-
long
no, but-
time.
You have
We're
a
talking about. the
contract. You have some sort of a bond that says. If you don't, if it isn't there, you forfeit.
This is. Senator Harrison.
I just have one suggestion, if you want it,
Sure.
so. At. The last part, line 6, so you could say, at what stage in the process? The improvements need to be to provide a reasonable expectation of completion.
Meanwhile,
Sound.
everything is taking place, the construction is taking place.
Yeah, completion of the utility improvements.
I would be okay with it. Because it,
I don't want.
That's stronger.
No, I'm just saying, no.
well, because I think that's the hope, is that
Sure.
that we're not planning in a way to get the status and then the plan evaporates.
Right.
So we're looking for some reasonable expectation that it's going to move forward. And if,
Like, that's why scheduled, I thought, was a stronger word than planned.
Well, I suggested deleting planning process. So what stage in the process? So the process would be planning, permitting, implementation, construction.
What stage in the process?
What stage in the process the improvements need to be to provide a reasonable expectation of completion.
So. I want to make sure we get it written down and then we'll come back. Reasonable expectation of completion,
Yes, completion isn't the best word, it's what I have.
okay, implementation,
What's the consequence? If you show up at the prom with suspenders and no trousers.
yeah, the metaphor time is over.
Well, what's the consequence? What's the consequence of the reasonable expectation not coming to fruition?
I think you would, if you had. You could get a designation, well, a couple things, one, if you're getting the designation, you're still gonna have to bring forward in that area. A project, as part of getting that project, you'll have to go get state and municipal permits, including wastewater. So, that was the thing.
If we get a permit for wastewater. That is yet to be. Constructed or
I never believe so.
contracted for.
I don't think that's,
That is,
I don't know the details of how far advanced the project has to be in order to get AR sign off. Yes, but
to your language, Wendy, did we leave the word planning? Because this is for planned improvements, and so it is the planning process.
Yeah, but the planning process is just the beginning. I would. Even, well, the whole purpose, these are guidelines that tell somebody to the board. I guess to so this is the goal of what the guidelines would include. So the permitting process.
There's a seat here, Kate.
Oh, I just know it here, because it's a Tom.
I'll be right back.
all right, so. Yes, okay.
We'll keep it.
Go on.
And then just one to the belts and suspenders, this process would define the belts and suspenders and the pants and what happens if we don't have it. And it might be different for different situations,
Okay.
in my opinion.
where's
It's not citizen guide purposes to be implemented, I mean, that's how I would see it, but.
Alright, so for the time being, so we're asking council to make one change on page 2, so that it will read, beginning at line 6, stage in the process. Stage in the process, the improvements need to be to provide a reasonable expectation of implementation.
Implementation or completion?
We started with one,
Implementation,
Either one's fine.
maybe complete is. We don't always, in a long project, we don't always know exactly what the completion date is, but you have to get started. What's the implementation?
That the water would be flowing, right, or the sewage could be going in.
Let's see it. Sarah McCormick. Please.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I've come on board on this bill, but I was a hard sell on Act 250 exemptions, the fundamental idea of Act 250 exemptions. First of all, because it carries with it the message that there's something wrong with Act 250, of not having Act 250 as a reward. And I've put that aside. But part of the argument in support of Act 250 exemption, which is really a big deal, is that it's only going to go to communities that have, and it's a long list of things. And now one of the things on that list, we're saying, you don't have to actually have it, you have to just be planning to do it. And I could be persuaded to even go with that, but I'm looking at Senator McDonald, to whom I look for ideas. I don't necessarily jump on his things too, but I respect his judgment. And I'm, you have a point. And I'm wondering what would satisfy you that would be an adequate stand-in for actually communities actually doing the thing that all along we've been told they have to do. And now we're saying, well, no, you don't have to really do it, you just have to plan.
I would turn around, Mr. Chair, and say, is the intention to say that our laws having to do with getting rid of sewage don't apply in District 1?
Okay. That
No,
answer.
but it's a case in point, was that they're actually, that, I don't think we're being told that they're dumping raw sewage. They're using another municipality's facilities, and the idea is, what are they gonna do?
Plan to.
And what are they gonna do when they can't do that anymore? And they're saying, well, we got a plan, so.
Is there a contract which is signed that the other municipality that? What if the other municipality changes its mind? What happens if
Then they don't get the,
So you want the plan locked
they're
in?
already building it, aren't they?
Yeah, they're already building it.
So with all due respect, I'd like to see us move on. We have recommended change. If anyone wants to bring a different language, please bring it to a subsequent meeting in writing. And otherwise, say, let's close this out and move on. I don't think it's a fall on our sword. It doesn't look at them. For me and the rest, as I can. Thank you, everyone.
You should get a picture of me angrily looking at you while I eat my food. Just trying not to use that one. Oh,
So the answer to my question is we should move on.
Yes,
Okay. It's not a satisfactory.
it's not always, this is
it's a nonsense.
challenging time of year, but we have another whole minute to get through, so. And this, so let's leave this.
Let me put it another way, I really want an answer, and I want an answer so that I can continue to support the bill.
Okay, how would you phrase the question that you want the answer to?
I already have, I'm asking what changes in the language would make the plans solid enough that we can regard the plan rather than the actual facts, that the plan is an adequate substitute for the flat, for the fact.
Yes, how long does it have to be?
Down,
Yeah.
Someone here said earlier that we hope that a plan would be in place, and hope is not a plan yet.
Yeah.
Do you,
It's not in place.
Thank you, so I'm gonna work on getting an answer, and if you have language you would like to see that. Solves this challenge for all of us. Please feel free to bring it to our next meeting. So just in writing. Okay, so council, if you could just help us see what else is changed in this amendment compared to the last time we saw.
the only other change in this amendment is that there is now a 10th instance of amendment, and that restores the land bank study or the land bank report. That was section 111. John did this.
Great.
Mr. Chair, I also sent that to Jude and I forwarded, Council Greg had emailed me the amendment and I sent it to both of you and I sent it to the vice chairs. Yes, but it's, I believe the same language, is my understanding.
That'd be a question for John. I'm this year.
John asked me if we were agreeing to put it in the big amendment, so we did have multiple amendments, and I made the executive decision, it's okay, yeah.
The land bank language?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the only.
That's what I thought. Okay, right, and now it's time to break, but then my punch list from our last meeting, okay?
So the only other thing I will say quickly is that you will notice that this amendment has additional names added to it, and you all raised your hand the last time, so if someone's name is on there that they don't want it on there, please let me know. And if there are additional names that need to be added, they can be taken off. Senator McDonald, your name is on the amendment, Senator Brown.
I will say I was the originator of the amendment, but if Senator Gray would like to be first, so that it's alphabetical of the 2 chairs and such.
Sure.
And the 3 chairs, I should say. Out, are we making this the one for finance too?
It needs to be all of us.
I think-
So,
Okay.
We might as well go there now.
So we might as well do Gray, Cummings from Hinsdale, everyone else.
Some signs out. Okay, great. Okay, thank you, council. Now we'll change gears. Mr. Keaton, if you want to join the table, and Senator Chittenden, if you would please sort of pitch the idea, like what's going on, and then we can do the walkthrough.
So you should have, I think I saw it at your desk, draft number 1.3, which is.
1.2.
I passed this out on the table.
I see one in front of Senator Harris.
Okay,
There's almost no difference between the two, so if you want to pop 1.3.
I'm working on 1.2.
okay, so before you go, just because our people who follow or going to our website, again, it's draft 1.3 to H687, it's dated, time and date stamp 5/10/24. KK 10:22 AM. Thanks so much.
So the work on this concurrently, this currently says Senator Cummings and Chittenden, but if you want to fold it into that other one, that's really up to what you all want to do. So let me give you the contours at a high level of what this does. This really restores the Senate second home property tax construct, which I would argue is the right way to go, for a variety of reasons, including proper tax policy to align with our housing objectives. But it does raise that to a 3.4% property tax, property transfer tax cost. And it's raising it to 3.4% to fund things that came from the House. Things that include raising the exemption threshold from $100,000 up to $200,000, which is a very reasonable thing to do since it's been like that for 30 years. So that makes a lot of sense. It also does raise as far as my understanding is, it raises enough money for the appropriations, the additional appropriations that came over from the House. And the one other thing, the 3.4% is my understanding is it will allow us to also add back something else that was in the Senate proposal that the House did remove, which has to do with the property tax freeze within a half a mile of designated areas. But importantly, this does not apply to TIF districts. There are some other small things that I really wanted to defer to Kirby to talk about 25,000 going somewhere, and then also keeps the clean water surcharge rate increase and exemption increases. So I'll leave it there and defer to.
And Mr. Keaton, if you can aim to like walk us through like
I'm happy to just add to what Senator Chitlin said without repeating anything, if that's okay. There's section, the second instance of amendment covers the property transfer tax exemptions. In the House version, there are 3 exemptions there. In this amendment, there are 2. The farm to farm exemption that I mentioned yesterday is removed because once you aren't following the House model for the PDT reform, that exemption that wouldn't be relevant anymore. So that's one additional thing. One thing I should note is that with the property freeze coming back, as Senator Shinn mentioned, it's virtually the same as what passed out of the Senate, including the 4-minute amendment proposed from Senator Brock to extend the designated areas half a mile. Except it varies from that 4 amendment in that 4 amendment had a process for municipalities to possibly vote to allow the property freeze in TIF districts. This version of it just says no property freeze in TIF districts. Okay. One big thing I gotta note there though is that the impact from the property freeze is that's education fund revenue. So that's from the education fund. It's not paid for within the bill.
Do we have a sense of the cost?
Deborah, during fiscal office, this would start the impact of start in fiscal year 26, so it wouldn't impact the yield bill. In calculation of the yields, but the foregone revenue to the education fund from that proposal is 1.16 million in fiscal year 26. 2.43 million in fiscal year 27 and 3.9 million in fiscal year 28. And then it stabilizes at roughly that amount.
3-year total run. Every.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you could explain again, council, you're saying that if you are in a TIF district, you are not eligible for tax stabilization? Under this proposal?
Yes, properties wouldn't fall as qualifying properties if they're in a TIF district. So the way the scheme is set up is that there's certain designated areas. This actually expands that from what the administration proposed to be a half mile away from those designated areas. But in any case in which there's a TIF district also overlapping that, then the freeze would not be allowed for properties located there.
So I guess I have concerns with that because as I think most TIF districts are in the designated downtowns. I thought that was the whole point. So it feels like this would be a disincentive to build in communities if you don't get tax stabilization and I'm just looking at council because.
Yeah.
Because so Hartford has a TIF district, Springfield doesn't. You would get tax stabilization in downtown Springfield, but not be available in Hartford.
So this wouldn't affect the TIF districts, obviously, but and then they operate to
Yes,
what they do. This would be about, the individuals making the new construction or rehabilitation, whether they could go through ACCD under this program and get that property freeze. If they're doing a project in a TIF district, they wouldn't be able to go through this.
That's concerning.
Could someone just remind me at least, this would be a policy decision that I thought we had laid it on the other side of. Where we tried to allow Barry and other places with TIF districts to work within this framework. That was language we saw at one point, and I don't know when the policy direction changed.
Yeah.
Who's the proposer of this provision?
This would be Senator Cummings and myself, and Senator Cummings is not here right now. She was one who I think asked.
I didn't even know.
But you don't remember an affirmative decision, because can you speak to one?
Senator Cummings asked me to draft it this way specifically.
Okay, so.
And I mentioned Barry, and she thought that Barry's had to do with parking and that it wouldn't be effective.
But it's within the boundaries of the TIF district. It's not just the TIF projects.
We had also even tried to extend further out for Barry's housing that was affected.
Yeah.
Right.
It feels like we're moving the opposite direction of our original proposal and yeah, so I guess at this point, I wouldn't sign on to the amendment if that's the policy position, because it does disadvantage the specific communities that we're trying to invest wastewater and sewer investments through tax incremental financing. And I understand the financial implications of it, but it feels counterintuitive to some of the other policies for why we have TIF districts in the first place, which is they could fund sidewalks and wastewater and sewer and all the things that we're trying to do. Wouldn't that be, so at this point, I won't be comfortable signing on to the policy decision.
Okay, thanks, please, and then, Sarah Schuman.
Sure, Ted Barnett, Grand Fiscal Office, just wanted to add some context that, because the property tax brief would primarily, involve residential properties. In TIF districts, the vast majority of them are non-residential
Yeah.
properties, so it adds a little bit of stickiness in thinking about who is going to be limited, because there may not be very many residential properties in TIF districts that would be excluded.
So can you run that by me one more time? So if you did a mixed use, like we have, in our TIF district, it's primarily mixed housing and development, like the first floor is a store and then the next 3 floors are housing. Would that qualify for tax stabilization in TIF district? I believe the answer is no.
It wouldn't call, in the language here, it's if you're in a TIF district, you wouldn't be eligible.
Okay,
Yeah.
So, Senator Schuman and then Ms. Sullivan.
So I heard this incentive, and my understanding of this is just one less opportunity for them to possibly collect more revenue. So I don't know, just a lack of access to incentive versus a disincentive. The other thing I'll say is that half a mile will be beyond. TIF districts are very prescriptive, but my understanding of them is that they're defined and drawn in specific properties and parcels, but this half a mile additional bubble is where you want a lot of residential properties to go, so I'm glad that that's still being addressed. As for I think the housing committee would probably speak better as to the pros and cons of excluding the TIF districts.
so you'd be able to get tax stabilization if you're within a half mile of a TIF district, but not if you're in a TIF district? Doesn't that seem counterintuitive of the whole point? Because aren't the TIF districts like the designated areas, so you can
But they're
build,
very small.
yes, and they're very, and they are the downtown,
Thank you.
okay.
So Ms. Sullivan and then Senator Watson.
While I appreciate the point that there is a lot of commercial development that may be the projects in a TIF district, I would say one of the criteria for getting a TIF district is meeting 1 of 5, and one of those is affordable housing. And many TIF districts have chosen affordable housing as one of their criteria, and I think Hartford is an excellent example of a TIF district that has invested an incredible amount of money in downtown housing in their TIF district.
Yeah.
Okay, so, Senator Watson, and then, Ron Truesdale, this is really a housing centric.
So, well, I guess my question is, I think it's really a question for the municipality, because they're the ones that need to continue to pay off their debt and with the revenue, collected from the increment. And so I guess I would be comfortable including the allowance of this freeze in a TIF district, as long as, which, I mean, to be fair, it still has to pencil out for the municipality, right? Like if there's this, and so I'm thinking about the interplay between how a TIF district works and this tax freeze, right? Because if you're freezing the property, then you can't get the increments. Am I understanding that correctly?
In one previous iteration of this, I had drafted language to specify that the value freeze would not be factored into the tax increment being calculated also.
It would not be factored into the tax increment, the municipality could still collect the increment or not?
So the municipality wouldn't be, I mean, my understanding of it, and John Gray specializes in this, not me. But my understanding of it would mean that the municipality wouldn't be responsible.
Would not be responsible.
Yeah.
Okay, and
So
so,
that's all this language says,
okay, so I'm,
but we have.
I mean, I'm very go with the flow, so whatever makes sense.
Well,
But, I'm not sure that I'm understanding the reason to exclude the TIF district.
so, Senator McDonald, do you have something you want to chip in on this section?
If TIF districts involve repayment of loans, if the TIF district doesn't repay the loan, what's the consequence?
Ed funds,
Pardon?
ed funds impact.
But the ed fund.
Which is short. The ed fund is impacted if.
So what's the consequence
To the community, it's not.
to the taxpayers of the state and the ed fund? What does the law call for?
So
What will happen next?
really not a slam dunk section, so let's flag it. Those are interested in pursuing it. Keep thinking and discussing, and we're on page 2 of 15, so we can, and also if we're gonna, Mr. Kirby, if we're gonna include, I'm sorry, Mr. Keaton, thank you, that first, if we're to amend it to address this, I don't know if that's just removing the entire section, or there's an adjustment to it that solves this panel for this.
Yes, like I was mentioning before, we could, I mean, we can change it any way you want. There's been at least 3 different versions. There's been, as it came from administration, it was the exemption was excluded from TIPS as it was proposed from the administration, which is what this does. There's also a version of it that does allow, just expressly allow, the exemption in TIPS, but with the language that specifies that it doesn't count towards the tax increment. And then the third option was what happened on the Senate floor and what was passed out of the Senate, which was to, by default, not allow them in TIPS, but to allow a municipality to vote, or the legislative body of the municipality would vote to allow it. And then they would also have to do some filings with Betsy to follow up with that.
I'm okay with that.
Option 3. Yeah, so I'm gonna
I
know.
like option 3 as well.
Yeah,
I like option 3.
Which is what I voted on and was your.
You talking about what happens?
I, no, for now, I think, so, let's,
For now, that's what we're doing.
well, for now, I'm asking us to pause the conversation and keep going, because we have, okay. Well, 13 more pages to do.
But we don't really, I mean, the only thing else that I would flag in all of this, yes, so we have skipped around a little bit, is that, the proposal as a whole, unless we make changes right now, generated about 25,000, that's it, extra revenue, than what the House had. And in draft 1.3, that's the difference between 1.2 and 1.3, is that, I put that 25,000 into the VHCB trust fund, and that was Senator Cummings' request.
Any.
Just,
So. Very well.
can I just quick clarify question? So
They're here.
25,000 net income?
It was, so that the House proposal was generating extra revenue, right? And that was removed from this, and then so there's this new transfer tax approach, which when compared with the House,
Oh, I see.
generates 25,000. So virtually the same.
Cause then there's the 8 million or something like that cost over the 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would first head on the total
I
revenue.
didn't know if that was if that was included, if the cost was included in your. I guess not,
The cost for what?
the cost of the implementation,
The
1.6 million, 2.4, I mean, I can.
go ahead.
Yes, so that's referring, those are ed fund costs and
Okay.
impacts, and so with the property transfer tax, or it's helpful to sometimes shorten it to just transfer tax. That is all general fund impact. Pat can go, I would defer to him to go through the breakdown of the allocation of additional PTT revenue that's generated in fiscal year 25. The point is that $25,000 is above what the House raised, so for all of the appropriations, you just have 25,000 more dollars that need to get put somewhere.
So the takeaway is the general fund expenditures here are paid for within the bill. But that property freeze is not paid for by this bill. That's gonna be coming off the ed fund in the future, and it's not paid for here.
That's Senator Cummings' recommendations.
I'm here.
Okay, I'm good.
Thank you. Mr. Peter, can you share economic data much with us?
So, yeah, Patrick Terry, joint fiscal office, just to take a really quick step back. So there is an allocation to the trust fund in the budget. In the House version, there was an additional about 5.1 million that was going to be going into the trust fund. Sorry, that was what came out of the Senate, there's about an additional 5.1. What came back from the House was an additional 6.1. And in this proposal, it's still roughly 6.1, but we're taking the loose change, that 25,000. And we're just putting that also into the trust fund, just because it leaves the appropriations that came to you from the House sort of intact and at the levels that they've proposed. And just provides a little bit of extra funding for the trust fund. So it's all in addition to what's in the budget.
Thank you. Any questions on the because then I think we have actually solved everything else, other than the flags thing. We started up front there in 1673. There was laid out 3 versions on option 1, 2, 3, and it seemed like there was interest in the committee on option 3. So if you could just remind us how that works, and then if we're in agreement, then I think we would ask you to redraft that section for food option 3.
So option 3 would mean, there's this definition of qualifying property, and so part of that definition of qualifying property would state that. A property located within a TIF district. Is qualifying property provided that the municipality. The legislative body municipality takes a vote and approves it, and then. There was language depending on whether it was an already approved TIF district or not, and so there's a slightly different process for going about that. That's what we're changing.
Good afternoon, you're coming in. So
I said there was trouble.
well, not really.
No, no,
We
trouble.
just all the way through, we went all the way through the amendment that you and Senator Chittenden had put together. We were going around and around it on section 73, the very first version, and then we talked about different versions of how it could be implemented, and there was one described as option 3, and that's if unless you know what Mr. Pete meant by option 3, if we could just explain it again briefly, then that's kind of where the committee was moving.
The way that it was when it came out off the Senate floor after Senator Brock's proposal, so allowing the properties in the TIF if the municipality the body votes. Yeah.
We just never took any testimony on that Senator Brock's proposal on the floor. But Senate Finance has no idea what the impact. I did get a letter of concern from the city of Montpelier about the TIF district thing, and I said, well, you have to approve it. So it would probably be okay if it does something you don't want. You can unapprove it. I think we just left it out because TIFs are always on tentative ground around this building, and we didn't want to make it worse because we didn't know what we were doing.
So I mean, there's a couple of ways forward. One is we don't have a second set of achievements. And another is alter it from we talked about 3 different ways to structure it. And then just prior to your coming in, the conversations, I would say the mood of the table was we're saying, okay, we're option 3 seems like the most effective thing. There was more head nodding.
I mean, the important thing to us, and the one thing the committee did get to discuss as a whole, was that property transfer tax change.
Yeah.
Yes. The property tax freeze is the governor's proposal. Personally, I don't care if it happens or not. The city of Barry would like that because they have a lot of housing that's going to qualify. It's dilapidated, it's inhabitable. There's probably a couple houses in Montpelier that would qualify. So that would be helpful. In TIF districts, I don't know what the impact would be if you did it.
It's the concern.
So Senator Brock, I would think we might be are not particularly well positioned to, if it's quote unquote administration proposal, I don't know if you were.
It is an administration.
One of those
proposal.
or something, like,
Yeah, or something.
so could you help us, sort our way through this back and forth?
Again, we did not take testimony on it, and it is, I think, more than anything else, a belief that reinforces, I think one of the things that Senator Clark mentioned was the number of properties that are in TIF districts, and by excluding them, we have both a disparate treatment and uneven treatment. I don't know that that's appropriate.
On in-TIF districts in flooding and flare burning. And they're dilapidated, they're uninhabited, owned by the municipality. I don't know. I mean, St. Albans, Bennington, the other two, Bennington didn't have flood damage, so they're not even included, I was thinking.
St. Albans did not have flood damage.
Flood Albans didn't, so.
Harvard's had an impact.
Yes,
We've had it with Irene.
Yeah, but this is flood damage this year.
No, I appreciate it, it's just trying to think it out in the tip.
As far as the flood part goes, you want me to clarify? What the-
Yeah. And then I'd like to go to Senator Chittenden and then back to Senator Watson.
As far as how this is tied to the flood or flooding in general, is that the counties that were part of the designation last year between July and October, 2 designations, for that qualify for individual assistance under FEMA are included, plus 2 additional counties that Senate Finance thought were important to add, which is Addison and Franklin. So that amounts to all of Vermont counties except for 3. And then that's really the flood part of it, because from there, it's narrowed down based on the designation, downtown, village center, new neighborhood or neighborhood development, et cetera. So that's the landscape of what's allowed. And Essex County, Bennington, and Grand Isle are not included. Those would be not flood.
So then Senator Watson and back to Senator Bobby.
Yeah, so I guess I just the aspect of option 3 that we discussed that resonated the most with me is that it gave the municipalities the option to do the other if they so chose. And I think particularly because TIF districts, create an obligation for the municipality, and they're the ones that are gonna need to figure out what pencils out for them and what their priorities are. Would they rather have this property value be frozen, or would they rather get the increment? Like they're gonna need to suss that out for themselves. So I guess and I think that's the direction that I felt like I was hearing people go in. And anyway,
That's what the amendment was, and that I think is they made it palatable that the communities had control over.
as long as communities have control, I'm down and ready to move.
Senator Ruff and Senator Chittenden.
I just want to add briefly that the reason that Addison and Franklin were added in addition, they were counties that were not considered by FEMA to be flooded, but we knew, as a matter of fact, that there were communities that had serious flood damage from this list.
Thanks.
I just did it with Senator Watson, and I think we should add option 3 to this amendment, get it out.
Okay, so Senator Pearson.
Just a quick
Senator Down.
replace, so if the state property tax exemption happens. Obviously then they don't pay, the owner doesn't pay the state property tax for a period of time. Does the assessment value after that period of time go up to what it would have been?
It's not a property tax freeze, it's a value freeze. So you're gonna pay this year's 15, 18, 12% increase. It's just gonna be on the lower, on the pre-recap. It's 3 years. I don't think anybody rehabs one of these houses completely in a year, not because they can get a whole lot of labor real fast. So it's kind of giving you a reprieve. I don't think it's going to amount to very much because it's the condition of the house on, is it March 29th or April 1st? And so if you haven't put the siding on, you can put the siding on in the plumbing in that next year and your value doesn't go up for that tax year. So
Okay,
it's just a freeze in the value.
okay, but then it's unfrozen completely at the end and it
Yeah.
pops up to where it needs to be.
Yes.
I think-
Okay.
I think maybe last question to Senator McDonald.
There were many houses that were, some that were destroyed, some whose value was severely reduced by the flood. And Senator Cummings introduced a bill which piggybacked or copied what was introduced during after Irene, that if your house was washed away, the assessment on the first of April was no longer valid. And you didn't have owe property taxes on the house, your house, if it was washed away. Or if its value was cut in half by virtue of the floods. There was a provision that you would only owe property taxes on the remaining half of the value. Now, we're talking about a freeze on fixing your house back up again.
So what you're referring to is a bill that passed out and is now law. That was
Yeah.
limited to a 2-year period, I think 23 and 24. For flood abatement, and that bill specifically is reimbursing the municipalities that chose to abate education tax. For
They
the-
didn't know the education tax because the property that they're being taxed on didn't exist.
And
Its
so-
value was gone.
And so what this would do is starting after this year, allowing if an owner goes through the process for ACCD. And the property that they want to work on is qualifying under the bill and they go through the hoops necessary. They could have the value frozen when they do rehabilitation. So let's say.
And the
yeah.
reason for that is,
In general, this is supposed to incentivize people to either fix up houses or building houses. And the policy. It's a policy choice that you think about whether you think that's true or not, but.
if I drive my car into my house, part of it falls down and I fix it back up again, I wouldn't be eligible for such a freeze.
Conceivably, that would be a rehabilitation.
And once again, this is being funded by,
By the education fund.
So,
We don't know where it's being funded, no, it's $1 million out of the ed fund this year, and then it rises over time.
any? Thank you, Senator McDonald. Any further points? Senator Watts.
This option 3 that we've been discussing, am I correct in understanding that option 3 is actually what exists in this draft?
No,
Okay,
Then, okay, so that was the change.
Okay,
I'll have to change that.
okay, so,
And I also heard earlier that you would like this to be added to the bill that Ellen and John.
exactly, I was gonna say, that's where it's incorporated settled, so.
I have.
That-
Yeah, choose to do that.
I've got to go through you.
Well, I don't, right now,
Everyone else.
I'm crafting now, maybe,
So-
I think I need.
Your draft
Folks over there, maybe roll.
Is it 12? Oh, but it is. Yeah, I gotta go find out. I'm trying to get them in. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, Senator Cummings, for jumping in.
Did you close the door?
Close the door, thank you.
Are there any other changes besides option 3 and?
So we'll do option 3, right, and then, if you can. What I was gonna say, before that, and you're still put that in, and then the only, this is down in meeting on a committee conference. And then we will be, good to go. Anything else? I have a question to get answered. I know it's between now and midnight.
No, and miraculously, we still have a quorum of all 3 committees, so we should stay alive and finish.
Okay, so I think we're going down to 3, everything else is what it is, the language is going over to Ellen. Senators, you may want to think ASAP really, if you now want to reconsider being an author of the amendment. If you want to take, you've seen the list on the draft that the council presented. You want to be banned to delete yourself, please let her know before she leaves the room. Okay, With that, thank you everyone from the joint work on 687. You will see this for the floor, which will be up soon, I think. For members of this Senate Natural, I'd ask you to stay around for 3 more minutes because SB 53 came back. And we just want to check in on 253 as a committee, so like can report it on the floor.
And then we have time for lunch.
That's the full natural resources.
Yeah,
So we'll,
It's not a conference committee.
no, that's the full committee, so we can have committees of.
and then we'll. It's, first, I think, they want this guys.
Five.
Stall.
Kirby has his in the Congress committee also.
Okay.
Neither of us can draft it.
Okay.
I'll tell.
But I think it's got it, it's not action free. All right, so new topic, we're surfing back in time to 253, the RVs and CVs. Ms. Chakowski, can you, I don't know if we have copies to look at, or,
You do not.
okay. If you could just walk us through the changes proposed by the House to 252, that'd be great.
Sure, Ellen Chakowski, Office of Legislative Counsel, so, S 253 came back from the House, it was only posted on the website probably right before this meeting, so I didn't send it to you, but it is on the website now.
Yep.
They made a couple of small changes, to the RV bill. So first, they put some guardrails around the Department of Public Service. They're providing legal assistance to the working group. So narrow the scope of how much legal assistance they would be providing.
Okay.
I can read it out to you if you'd like. So the department shall provide legal assistance as to matters of procedure, their powers and duties, existing state programs, existing legal requirements or obligations, and the drafting of proposed legislation.
Okay, so further defined.
Yeah. Additionally, your study committee the working group was supposed to last until 2030.
Yeah.
They haven't had it last until 2020, the beginning of 2026. And so a year and a half, and they have it bringing back 2 reports.
Okay,
So,
instead of 1. Oh, just 2 reports, just 2 sites.
yeah, they're just doing 2
They didn't want to be a committee in
in
perpetuity.
perpetuity,
Yeah.
yeah. The other 2 things that happened in this bill are that the Office of Professional Regulation slightly narrowed
Right,
what they will be asking registrants instead of requiring registrants
for information.
for information.
Is the checkbox to certify that you know that there is RVs
It's still in there,
still in there?
yes.
Right, and we pretty much last minute borrowed Rep. Campbell's
Yeah.
OPR language. And it wasn't fully vetted by OPR until it got upstairs.
Yeah.
So no surprise, thank you.
Yep. And then there's just a small change in the still in the OPR part, the contract template. And so they struck the reference to the CDs in it, and they also made, I think they changed the word to, they changed the phrasing of it so that the project is required to comply with the RVs, not the contractor.
Okay. Then can you remind me why they strike CDs? Was there a rationale for that?
They felt that because this is a residential building contractor registry, that they probably don't need. And that if they're doing commercial buildings, they probably have their own contracts. And so I cannot verify the accuracy of that,
Okay. Okay, great,
but
thank you.
projects will still have to comply with whatever law applies.
Yeah.
So,
All right, great. Well, thank you for the high level walkthrough and from my perspective. Virtual. So I think we would want to, with the formal vote to do it, take a committee position, in terms of recommending concurrence to the Senate. All those in favor of recommending concurrence for our colleagues, say aye.
I,
Mr. Conley, so that's 401, and I'll be happy to report that. Thank you, everyone. Senator McDonald, we're just voting on a committee position on the residential and commercial building energy standard proposal amendment back to us. And just before you open the door, we voted for the 401. I don't know if you want to review that or just leave it as 40.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you for.
Right, sure, thank you. Okay, no, it's tricky time of year for sure. With that, unless anyone else has any further business, I think we are gonna go right to see that amendment that Ms. Chakowski and Mr. Kirby have put together. We'll come right to this floor.